Picture rural Alabama in the 1940s. Dirt roads wind through cotton fields, and the weight of segregation rests heavy on every family. On a small farm outside Troy, a boy rises before dawn to help his parents tend to the land. His family are sharecroppers, people who work long hours with little reward, trapped in a cycle of poverty that mirrored the racial injustice of the South. That boy was John Robert Lewis, born on February 21, 1940. While many children played outside carefree, Lewis often slipped away to sit among the chickens. To him, those chickens were more than animals, they were an audience. With a Bible in hand, he practiced sermons, preaching about justice, kindness, and hope. He even baptized a few of them in a tin tub of water. His family laughed, but the young boy was serious. In his heart, he already believed he had a calling to lead. From those humble beginnings, Lewis would rise to become one of the most enduring voices of the civil rights movement and later, the conscience of the U.S. Congress. His story is proof that even the most unlikely beginnings can give birth to a legacy of change. Growing up, Lewis quickly learned the harsh realities of segregation. Signs reading, "Whites Only," and "Colored," marked every corner of life: schools, buses, libraries, and even water fountains. As a child, he wanted to borrow books from the local library, but black children were not allowed. Instead of discouraging him, this fueled his determination to learn. Lewis became the first in his family to graduate from high school, then enrolled at the American Baptist Theological Seminary in Nashville, where he paid his way by working as a janitor. Later, he studied philosophy and religion at Fisk University. It was here, surrounded by like-minded young people, that he discovered the ideas that would shape his life. Meeting Martin Luther King Jr. As a teenager, Lewis had heard a voice over the radio that stirred something inside him: Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The words of King and the example of Rosa Parks, who refused to give up her bus seat in Montgomery, inspired him deeply. At just 18, Lewis wrote a letter to Dr. King, expressing his desire to be part of the struggle for equality. To his surprise, King replied, inviting him to meet. From that moment on, Lewis' path was clear. He would devote his life to the cause of justice, but he would do so through nonviolence, guided by the principles of faith and love. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, Lewis joined workshops on nonviolent direct action led by the activist and minister James Lawson. These workshops trained young people to endure verbal and physical abuse without fighting back. Lewis became a leader in the Nashville sit-ins, where students peacefully occupied segregated lunch counters in department stores. White mobs hurled insults, spit, and sometimes fists. The young activists were arrested again and again, but they refused to give up. For Lewis, the sit-ins were not only about lunch counters, they were about dignity, the right to exist as equals in public life. His arrest record grew, but so did his reputation as a committed and fearless activist. The Freedom Rides. In 1961, Lewis volunteered for the Freedom Rides, organized by the Congress of Racial Equality, CORE. The mission was to test a Supreme Court ruling that banned segregation in interstate bus travel. The Freedom Riders boarded buses bound for the Deep South, knowing full well they might not survive. Violence erupted almost everywhere they went. One bus was firebombed in Anniston, Alabama. In Montgomery, Lewis and others were beaten by angry mobs. In Birmingham, he was attacked and bloodied. Despite the danger, Lewis kept writing. He later said, "We were determined not to let any act of violence keep us from our goal. We knew our lives could end at any moment, but we believed so deeply in the cause of justice that nothing else mattered." The March on Washington. By 1963, at just 23 years old, Lewis was elected chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, making him the youngest leader of the major civil rights organizations. That same year, he was invited to speak at the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, where over 250,000 people gathered at the Lincoln Memorial. His draft speech was fiery, demanding urgent change and questioning the federal government's commitment to protecting black lives. Some older leaders worried it was too confrontational. After tense negotiations, Lewis agreed to soften the language, but he still delivered one of the most powerful speeches of the day. Standing just steps from Dr. King, Lewis' words carried the urgency of youth and the unshakable belief that America had to act, and act now. Bloody Sunday in Selma. On March 7, 1965, Lewis helped lead over 600 marchers in Selma, Alabama, demanding voting rights. Their destination was Montgomery, the state capital. As they crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge, they were met by state troopers, deputies, and a sea of hostility. The order was given, and the troopers advanced. Tear gas filled the air, horses charged the crowd, and officers swung nightsticks with brutal force. Lewis, at the front of the line, was beaten to the ground. His skull was fractured, blood covering his coat. That day became known as Bloody Sunday. The images shocked the nation, broadcast on television and printed in newspapers worldwide. Public outrage pushed President Lyndon B. Johnson to introduce the Voting Rights Act, which passed later that year. Lewis never forgot the bridge. Decades later, even as a congressman, he returned to march across it again, often hand in hand with presidents and young activists, reminding America that the fight for justice is ongoing. A career in Congress. In 1986, Lewis was elected to represent Georgia's 5th District in the U.S. House of Representatives. He would go on to serve for 34 years, becoming one of the most respected members of Congress. Nicknamed the Conscience of Congress, he consistently fought for equality, voting rights, healthcare, immigration reform, and gun safety. Even when debates grew bitter and partisan, Lewis' moral authority commanded respect on both sides of the aisle. But he never stopped being an activist. He often joined demonstrations, even staging sit-ins inside the Capitol to demand stronger gun laws. For Lewis, politics was not about power, it was about service. Passing on the torch. Determined to teach younger generations, Lewis co-wrote the graphic novel trilogy, March, with Andrew Aydin and illustrator Nate Powell. The series won numerous awards and brought the story of the civil rights movement to classrooms, libraries, and young readers everywhere. Lewis understood that the struggle for justice had to be passed down like a flame. His stories, his scars, and his teachings became tools for the next generation to carry forward. Final years and farewell. In December 2019, Lewis announced he had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Even as his health declined, he continued to speak out, urging Americans to remain vigilant in protecting democracy. On July 17, 2020, John Lewis passed away at the age of 80. His funeral, held at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, where Dr. King once preached, drew presidents, civil rights leaders, and countless admirers. Tributes poured in from around the globe. The Edmund Pettus Bridge was covered in flowers, and thousands paid their respects as his casket crossed it one last time. A legacy that lives on. John Lewis' story is not only about the past, it's about the present and the future. He taught that justice is never guaranteed. It must be fought for, protected, and renewed by each generation. His mantra of, "Good trouble, necessary trouble," still echoes today. It calls on us to speak up when we see injustice, to act with courage, and to keep marching forward even when the road is long. John Lewis began as a boy preaching to chickens in Alabama. He became a giant of the civil rights movement, a defender of democracy, and a beacon of hope. His life reminds us that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they refuse to give up. As he once said, "You are a light. You are the light. Never let anyone, any person or any force, dampen, dim, or diminish your light. John Lewis' light still shines. It is now up to us to carry it forward. Thanks for watching. Please consider subscribing and see you soon.